started with a very good-looking rooster in Johnny from New Zealand. We're finishing with an even better good-looking rooster, Luca. And Luca is a designer renowned for his logo and bespoke typography. His art has been in countless publications around the world and included in numerous exhibitions. Luca's creative work has won international awards and received recognition from the New York Type Directors Club, D&AD and Cannes Lion. Pretty fancy pants. So glad he could join us. Please bang them together for Luca.
So thanks for coming out today. Gonna lose 45 minutes of your life you're not gonna get back. So I'm gonna try and make it good for you. I guess I started out in the creative industry in the non-traditional way. I've always drawn as a kid, and I kind of had my grandmother who was an artist from an early age that exposed me to a lot of exhibitions. And I also kind of grew up overseas for a little while, so there was a culture change when I was younger. And yeah, I just kind of, the way I've pursued my whole career hasn't been it's been very intuitive. I've just followed things that I've liked, and then things have grown from there. And I think a really important part of being creative and getting into the industry, I mean, for myself, everybody approaches it differently, is creating community. I think events like this and Node and what Kim and the guys, like what everyone's doing here is really important. So it's great because it inspires and kind of generates new ideas and everything. So, all right. A bit more traditional. All right, so this is me, and I'm not putting up pictures to make myself look cute from an early age. That's me overseas in socialist Romania. That's kind of where I started school, and they kind of got me to take a photo with some kids I didn't know, so that's why I'm frowning and cranky. I was like, who are these people? That was my first day of school. It was a very different system. It was kind of very totalitarian. It was all that kind of stuff, so my kind of parents wanted to kind of leave and kind of create a better lifestyle for me and give me more opportunities, so they came over here. That was my first day at school out in Fairfield, which is like an outer suburb of Sydney, learning English and kind of integrating and kind of creating a new life. I mean, I only knew how to say I don't know and maybe. So I was the butt end of a lot of jokes for kids because I just said I don't know and maybe to everything. Then as I grew older, my parents also stayed out west, and I kind of grew up in Cabramatta, which was kind of like a Footscray in the 90s in Melbourne. There was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of violence. And that was just the neighborhood my parents and I lived in because that's where they found work. And that's me close to 20 odd years ago when I first got into the industry. I'm wearing a Designers Republic t-shirt. I was really into Designers Republic. I even went to Sheffield to meet Ian Anderson and those guys. So yeah, you know, and I think the reason I'm showing these photos is all the life experiences and things that we go through shape the way we kind of create our work and our vision. So at moments in time throughout my life, I was all those people. So I saw it through that little kid's eyes. I saw it through the kid growing up in a rough neighborhood. All those influences shaped the way I approach creativity and the way I look at my work. I kind of levitated towards more graph and street art and things early in my career, and did a lot of community-based stuff around that. Flew a lot of artists out to Australia from those backgrounds. And it's because I kind of grew, it felt familiar to me. And I kind of grew up around that. So this is like a Clyde rail yards in the 90s. I used to love to kind of be in high school and just jump fences, break into abandoned yards and warehouses and take photos. I found that really inspiring. And I also kind of felt it developed my eye for composition and positive and negative space and framing stuff. I also love graph because of the letter forms and the colors and everything. So that played a big influence in my career and my work. This was in high school. I love drawing, like I said, from an early age. So I kind of did a comic book for my major. So I was really heavily into illustration. Then that was like at college when I did design at Enmore. I love doing like industrial design as well. So I sketched a lot of my ideas out. So even now with a lot of ideas, when a project starts, I'll just sketch stuff out. And then I think that's also really important, which EJ touched on. The world right now, I mean, it's a double-edged thing. It's like, it's amazing because everything's opened up and it's democratized creativity. It's democratized like a global market, and we get access to social media. But then it's also kind of like, it's created a lot of clones. It's created a lot of stuff on tap, which is saturated. Just, you know, somebody will do a tutorial, somebody will do a style. All of a sudden, a month later, like all the social streams will have a similar thing going on. And there's no real substance or idea. It's just kind of creating stuff stuff's sake, just to kind of create content. So I think it's really important kind of creating things that have an idea and having a voice, and then clients will always come for that. Clients will come for ideas and storytelling and having a narrative, and obviously also building good relationships. So early on, we wanted to kind of create community, not just do things for ourselves. So a good friend of mine, Maddie Burden, him and I, actually, Renee Cooper from Mr., she was there in the early days. She knows Maddie. We kind of all started out in the early 2000s. And so Maddie and I met through a mutual friend, Danny, and he kind of introduced us, and we started doing a lot of stuff and a lot of exclusives. Like, we're the only magazine in Australia who did a Bathing Ape cover. They did a cover exclusively for us in the mid-2000s. Nigo did the cover, which was huge, and we secured that. But it was all born out of wanting to collaborate and wanting to reach out and kind of create community and give back. The very first artist I approached was Futura 2000. So I kind of started, as well as designing, doing nightclub flyers and freelance jobs. I'd get the money from that, and then I'd invest it in doing like community stuff, like putting on art shows and events. So I was like 22 at the time. I flew out Futura 2000, and he was hard to get a hold of. Like, before social media, you couldn't just tag somebody or approach them on their social media stream. He had a devoid website of any information. So I kind of had to like look at the who is information, stalk him, and then I found his number, and then he was like, "Oh man, you're like CIA, you found my number." But he'd never been out to Australia before, so he was stoked to come out, and we did a Sydney and Melbourne show. And when we did the mag, we used to go out on the street and promote. So we'd kind of like put up street posters, like Para and Delta from Amsterdam did a poster. We flew out Mr. Cartoon, Doze Green, guys like Neckface. That's Eric Elms, who used to do like a lot of the Supreme graphics back in the day, and Adorn, like super talented illustrator from New York. Angela Boatwright, who's the photographer of The Girl Winking. And then also guys like Lee Quinones from Wildstyle. We brought him out. The guy on the decks is Blaze, like an old school Sydney writer. I ended up meeting a lot of these guys too, and kind of creating this platform just because of the affinity of loving graph and street art, and that really influenced my own aesthetic and my own sensibility towards looking at type and 3D and lettering. I used to kind of travel to college when I was younger to do the design course and travel on the train line, and the train line was completely bombed by all these different writers using really unique kind of styles of lettering and type, and it almost looked Japanese to me. And it's like, the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to meet these guys. And in the late 90s, I actually got the opportunity to meet some of these guys when they were doing a live paint, and then we just developed a relationship. I met Fibs, Demote, guys like Murder and Puzzle from Melbourne who did the Kingsway, and a whole bunch of guys, really cool guys. So this is something we did, we kind of curated. Back in the day when we were doing the mag, we started doing things with artists and brands. I mean, Absolute was already doing it. We kind of curated some of the Australian artists for the Absolute brand. And I think that's commonplace now, like brands getting artists to do stuff. But when you think about it, brands like Absolute were doing it way, way back in the day, since the 80s. And now it's just it's just commonplace to do that. So that's Jose Parla and JR in New York. And then we also did something quite unique that got written about all over the net. We did the first ever international lasered art show called Refill 7. And we pretty much had guys like VCJ, all the guys who did like the Santa Cruz graphics, everyone kind of contributed, and that was really pushing the medium of lasering onto skateboards. That's Costa Ceramities, Kazuki Kuroishi from Neighborhood, and James Lavelle's brother. And then that was Tony Despina from New York doing a lettering type show in Sydney. That's Shu from Amsterdam, and Tony Hawk when we did a show in Sydney. So building community also kind of introduces you to other people and building relationships, which is super fun, and it's always exciting beyond just being in a studio or collaborating with an agency. You're getting out into the real world and interacting. I mean, I think Melbourne's amazing for that, and Melbourne's like a hub for street art. A lot of stuff gets buffed in Sydney. You guys really know how to kind of like make it flourish, which has always been a plus around the city, and I think the guys at council get it too. So doing all the community stuff led to kind of like doing more 2D illustration stuff. So I ended up to kind of like doing stuff for Hurley and Nike, for LeBron. So kind of like doing super intricate type lettering and illustrations, which I was really passionate and into. Doing some stuff for Staple and Ruka. This job came about born out of that work. I did some stuff for Dainese, for Valentino Rossi. So doing the laser cut exhibition for the skateboards led on to doing this project where we laser cut a whole suit. So they kind of like laser cut the leather and then kind of sandwich it together. And this was like a limited edition product for Valentino Rossi. Also ended up kind of creating a platform for Tiger Beer based off the stuff that we did for Refill. They kind of approached us, and this ran for a decade and a half, so about 15 years, all throughout Asia, all throughout the Middle East. And it was just live events, doing kind of graph shows and live music. And this kind of ended up adding value and building brand awareness for Tiger Beer, whereas their market share was seen as a kind of more, alternative beer, not as a really kind of cool, funky product that you want to pick up. So this kind of helped them out with that. And from one of my first jobs was actually working at a place called The Attic in Sydney. So I started doing I kind of like did college, but then I always wanted to do my own thing. So I ended up doing like nightclub flyers and stuff when I first got out of college because I want to stay independent. So I did nightclub flyers. I had a bit of experience doing web design. And then there was a place called The Attic starting up in Sydney, which were from London. And they did amazing work. And there was a book called Noise out. This was like in the late 90s. And everybody said, you're not going to get a job there. They're not hiring. So I went to one of their market research kind of groups. And I answered all the questions, and I said to the guy at the end, look, I work for Bread and Water. I love a job with you guys. I know I'm going to get amazing experience. And he was like, actually, you know what? We're not really hiring, but we need some help with our web stuff. So that was kind of like a foot in the door. And the experience I got there was amazing. I mean, that's where I first learned Cinema 4D with one of the first Cinema 4D kind of releases. One of the other guys in the studio was using Cinema, and I was like, what's this, It's like you can use it to kind of create 3D type. You can kind of add dimension, and it really opened things up. So all that kind of built up over time. I've always kind of used Cinema 4D in my workflow to kind of create type and lettering and environments, things like that. But I've never kind of gone out and sold myself as a technical Cinema 4D guy, because it's always been like, okay, I'll have an idea. What's the best way to execute that idea? Is it using Cinema? Is it using another motion platform? How do I integrate and kind of build on what I'm doing? So this job was for AMP. Ended up doing this type. They wanted to kind of just reposition the brand, and we ended up doing all these kind of like physical 3D sculptures. This was an infrastructure type. So it was all built out of, obviously, things that mean infrastructure. And they really loved this, and then they kind of like wanted us to kind of work on some motion stuff. So they teamed us up with a production studio, so we did this ad. So the company that put all that together and did like majority of the 3D was a company called Res, and there was like an awesome producer there as well, Roy DiGiorgio, who's in the industry. And then it was ongoing, and then the guys from Collider approached us as well, who do amazing work in Sydney, to collaborate. And there's an amazing designer there in-house as well, Andrew Van Westenhausen, who does a lot of 3D stuff as well. So we kind of got together and collaborated for the next AMP piece. And what the client wanted to do is actually make these into physical installations in a public space. So we approached the type and the lettering as if you would, if we were going to build it. But unfortunately, in the end, they didn't have the budget to do that. But this is kind of how the thought process started out. A lot of the type was mechanical, and it had to work in the real world. It could actually, you needed to slide out as you would if we were doing an installation. So this is some of the type design for that. This was actually rendered out in Arnold and Maya and Cinema, I think. So all this kind of got, it all started out through sketches. So we kind of conceptualized a lot of sketches, thought of like cool, interesting ways to kind of like do an art installation and then go and flesh it out. And this is what the end result looks like.
Whatever your question, AMP, Australia's financial experts, has the answers.
All right. And this next project is I guess, one of the key things that I think as creatives you kind of need to retain throughout your career, which is kind of like overcoming the hurdle of possibility and creating an opportunity whereas there may not be an opportunity there in the first place, or you kind of opening a door that might otherwise be closed. So I found out they were kind of shooting The Great Gatsby in Sydney, and as you do, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be awesome to work on that? So what I did was I actually found out who the art director on the film was, and I sent him a care package just full of typography and lettering posters, just calling out saying, you know, if they needed somebody, I'd love to work on it. So not expecting to hear anything, all of a sudden, like I got an email, and the guy said, actually, you know, I love your work. I'm sending it on to Catherine. The art director's name was Ian Gracie. Super kind guy to even actually think of kind of forwarding it on and following through. So he sent it on to Catherine Martin, and they'd already kind of finished a lot of production. They needed to get a trailer out for the film, and they didn't have the branding sorted out yet. And some of the guys that already got booked in LA, they weren't happy with the work. So they said, look, we'll get you on board. It's not a guarantee. You're going to have to pitch for it. But if it works out and we like your stuff, then, you know, it's a gig to be had. So I ended up kind of like sending my work through and kind of got called into with Catherine and her assistant Silvana, who's also an awesome designer. So Silvana Azzi Harris, if you look her up. And I went to Fox Studios and kind of had a meeting, and they kind of saw my stuff, and we got on really well. And they kind of said, yeah, put some work together, and you know, like we'll put it forward to Warner Brothers. So this was some of the kind of concept work. It all starts out with sketches. So some of the ideas that I ended up having was the fact that he was quite affluent. You know, the Gatsby put on a lot of parties, and he's from New York, and I always loved the aesthetic of the Chrysler building, the really beautiful ornate deco kind of copper and metalwork in New York. So I started with that. And he also drives a Duesenberg in the movie, like the yellow car. So it was kind of like maybe using the hubcap, maybe using the front of the car. I mean, that's a key element in the film. And then he also kind of puts on a front to kind of try and impress Daisy in the film. So it was about that. So this was kind of like some of the original illustration. And then he kind of grew out a 2D And then I started playing around in 3D. So this was like some of the original concept work. And I kind of said, you know, wouldn't it be great to kind of have it come out, and wouldn't it be great to kind of have it in 3D? I always thought of the letter forms as being a 3D element in the end. And this was also some of the other alternatives that we explored. It was kind of being written as the narrator, and the narrator is kind of like typing out the story throughout the film. So one of the other concepts was, what if the titles are made out of all the text from the film, and they kind of make the actors in the opening sequence. And then this ended up being the selected direction. And it's a customized typeface, and I kind of made it so it was alternating between a pinstripe and a solid form. And then this also got modified and crafted into this final piece with the guys from Diva Studios in LA. They took a lot of the assets. Silvana kind of worked on crafting the background, and she did all the illustrations for the gold brass. So this was the final piece. It also kind of got translated onto clothing. Then it went onto billboards, and then also went into Russian. and then the next piece is done by the guys at Method Studios in Sydney. They kind of pretty much took the assets, Silvana stuff, and they pretty much crafted the 3D titles on behalf of Warner Brothers and Baz and everybody else. Cool, yeah, so that was super fun, and it was all in 3D, and at the cinema you wore the glasses and you kind of came out into the cinema, and it looked really cool. Cool, so this is another idea we had. This is a good friend of mine, Selena from Sydney, and she kind of approached us to kind of do something for Out and About. And I had this idea of kind of creating, like I'd heard about this material out in the market called LED fabric. So I had an idea, wouldn't it be cool to kind of have a tent structure and have it come alive, and you could stream music to it. You could kind of like be solar powered. You could kind of take it camping, and then you could have graphics and video play on the outside, and we could really own that IP of graphic LED fabric tents. Of course, the actual technology is in its infancy, and what ended up happening was a little bit different to what the original idea was. I mean, the LED fabric's still being developed, so it's quite cable heavy. It's run by a lot of transformers. But we ended up kind of getting the idea out. So we sold the idea in to the city of Sydney, and they really loved it. And they said, yeah, we're going to commission you to do this for Out and About. So we did these LED teepees, and we had guys like G-Monk, Universal Everything, Jonathan Zawada, Brett Chan, a whole bunch of guys put graphics together for the teepees. And some of them were also interactive. And it was just a new technology that I wanted to explore. I think one of the exciting things that I find about working in our industry is just kind of discovering new technology and then trying to apply it or find a way to kind of make it come alive in kind of either through an art event or for a client. Yeah. And one of the teepees as well had a motion sensing camera as well, so a lot of the graphics were interactive. That's why you could kind of like see people moving in front, and then it kind of affected the graphics. So this is something I actually worked on a couple of years ago. So they saw the Gatsby and they saw some of the LED stuff at on the Art and About piece, and the Australian Open was just about to install LED graphics all around the stadium. So they kind of saw that and they said, "You've got experience in the medium. We'd love to get you on board to kind of do the opening round of kind of graphics that are going to go on the screens at the Oz Open." So that was a huge honor. And that was off the back of a branding that I did with a local agency here in Melbourne for the actual Australian Open itself. So this is kind of how I started out with the sketch work. This was the 16-17 Oz Open, and they kind of came up with a concept, it's open season. So I fleshed it out and thought of the idea, wouldn't it be cool just kind of make it out of all the kind of rackets and clothing and the gear that all the kind of players use. So it's kind of based on that. I used cinema to put this together. Yeah. I mean, I love cinema for its use of ease, kind of like, you know, just you can really craft, you know, sketch out an idea and really kind of take it to where you want it to be. So that was just kind of like done with a physical render at the time. And that went on to Rod Laver Arena and the whole huge campaign around Melbourne. So this was the ad that came out of it, and they made the type into some moving image as well.
Under largely sunny skies, clouds, nothing to complain about. What up? You're a long way away from the first ball of this year's tour.
It's open season for the Australian Open. Book now through Ticketek.
Yeah. So that was just a year just before they switched over to the EAO. The next one was the job that I spoke about. So this was actually creating the graphics that went around the stadium. So this was the conceptual stage. It was a direct to client with the Australian Open team for Tennis Australia, and kind of had the idea of kind of like really using the space, so almost like things rippling around the stadium, and it's a really wide format. It's almost like an extended web banner. So kind of creating graphics for that, it really had to take that into consideration and how everybody's going to see it from around the stadium. So when they'd have a break and there was an ad break during the matches, the guys would sit down and this would kind of play on screen. And it was the whole idea of a nucleus and like having a night and day version, because some of it was getting played during the day, some of it was getting played at night. So it was like a dark and light kind of feature. So this was just some of the initial kind of renders we showed the client to get them on board of what the direction we wanted to kind of take it in. And it was a great job, and actually Ben Watts saved my butt on the job because he did some amazing Houdini work. We had a crazy deadline. It was just right before Chrissy. We worked through Christmas and New Year's to get it out for early Jan. And yeah, we just went hard at it and then got all the work out. So these are some of the initial renders I got from Ben when we started working together. This was kind of like doing wipes and transitions. Just some really beautiful close-up work. And these were the final spots. And I've kind of chopped them up in a way because I can't, if I show you the very wide version, it just doesn't translate on a smaller screen. You lose all the detail. So that was the day version. And this kind of wrapped it all the way around the stadium. Okay, and that's the night version. We'll skip that one. We'll skip, yeah. So some of the wipes and transitions. Okay, this is another client that got a great opportunity to do something unique. So it's a sound studio from Sydney, and they wanted to rebrand. And I came up with a concept to, the way the company's name was Noise, and the way everybody in the company would say noise by the sound of their voice would have unique chords in the letter N-O-I-S-E. So ended up kind of like tracking that, recording that, and then separating each letter, and then kind of creating that into rosettes for everybody's business card. So everybody's business card had a different rosette, and that rosette was the way they say noise. So that was done with some of the guys at the Monkeys, a guy called Paul Sharp as well, an agency from Sydney, and that kind of got a lot of awards and recognition at Cannes as well. And this is the kind of process video. I know I'm kind of strapped for time, so I'm kind of rushing through, but this is some of the process video on filming it. We actually recorded some of the sound waves and stuff. All right. Okay, so this is some other stuff that I've experimented with, which I got recognition for. Some of this stuff's quite old, but I started doing it when it was in its infancy. It's rapid prototyping. I was one of the first to kind of start exploring. They were using it a lot architecturally and medically and everything else, but I really wanted to push it typographically. I heard that you could use it for typography. So using Cinema, I kind of created the models, and then guys at 3D Systems here in Melbourne helped me convert that to a rapid prototyping model. So this was one of the first pieces I created, doing rapid prototyping. And this was for an art show called There Goes the Neighborhood. So I kind of like played on the words and I said, steady as she goes. This was another piece I created using rapid prototyping. I think showing this stuff as well I think it's really important, obviously, being a creative, experimenting a lot in spare time and doing stuff that can kind of play back and feed back into your commercial work. So when you get a chance, I mean, I've got 2 boys, which are amazing, and, the family side, and then I try and, when I get chances, I kind of try and do some experimental personal stuff as well. This is using Cinema as well. This is not a rapid prototype, but this is the kind of model that I start with. And speaking of experimenting, this is another style that I worked on developing. And this is something that I'll show you guys a little bit, in a few slides. I use this as a unique technique to kind of create artwork. And I do models in this style, and that kind of translated into a Star Wars show earlier in the year. This is some more of my 3D type. Again, all this stuff's in Cinema. This is in Cinema using Octane. Okay, so a brand saw the rapid prototyping stuff, and they kind of had an artist series, and they got us to do the Links Expression series, and there was a whole host of artists, photographers, some fashion labels, and we ended up doing the dark and gold. And I got an awesome printing company here in Melbourne called Avon Graphics to do some limited edition posters. They're an old family-run company, and they do really beautiful work. So if you ever want anybody in print, Avon Graphics did really nice printed material. So we did an embossed poster for the event. So it's actually, the word in the middle as well is an ambigram. So the temptation, you can flip it upside down, you can read it both ways. And it was the dark and gold. I mean, that was the kind of theme that the links gave me. And this was done in cinema version, kind of doing some stuff by hand, an illustrated thing in the studio. And obviously seeing the 3D printed stuff, the guys from Links, I thought of the concept, wouldn't it be cool to kind of almost do like stubby holders that you could kind of put your Links can in? But they didn't kind of like buy into that concept, but they said, oh, actually we do like the concept, but let's just do them as sculptures for the event. So they did an art event in Sydney, and then we ended up doing these dark and gold sculptures that I again used 3D systems to produce. And this is like a making of video. My name is Luca Ionescu. I'm a graphic designer and typographer from Sydney, and I run Like Minded Studio. What I usually like to do is take something classic and modernize it. So I'd be looking at a period piece of type, and I'll kind of like process that and reinterpret it. It was amazing to collaborate with the guys from Links. Remember sitting down with them and kind of them showing us through their new packaging. We really wanted to kind of put our signature on there and kind of do something innovative and amazing with rapid prototyping and 3D printing. When we saw the cans, really wanted to kind of take them and do something unique, just really break out of the can, have a bit of an explosion of graphics coming out, almost as if we were kind of carving into the can itself. It's a really awesome project, and so happy to be able to get the opportunity to create the 3D printed cans. They came out looking amazing, and so did the rest of the artwork. Really stoked. Cool. And the guys in Sydney who did that, I did that with the guys at Soap. This is these guys do some amazing stuff. It's the DGR. It's like a global ride that raises money for mental health and prostate cancer. And they've been a regular client over the last couple of years. I've worked on their branding, doing 2D and 3D stuff. And yeah, it's a global ride. People just ride their motorcycles and dress gentleman-like and raise money. So this is some of the type and lettering I did for that. And they're really great guys because they really have open briefs, so I can really go all out and just try different things, and then they'll kind of go for a route. So this was like in cinema, and that's the kind of like Sir Silver Tweed, I think the name is. And then I got the artist who I collaborated with, and we flew out, Tony Despina. He actually made Serif Gothic, who is like famous typeface. They've used it in Star Wars, they've used it everywhere. He used to work for LeBallon, with Herb LeBallon, back in the day. So I actually approached the guys and said, actually, you should get Tony to do some stuff. So they did these posters. It's a whole bunch of patches. Always like, I mean, what I love about 3D is kind of just giving dimension, and I think just naturally the world around it, I mean, you know, it's a 3D world, so bringing that back into illustration, back into the work that I do just kind of feels like a natural thing to do. So I think there's an element of that I always bring into clients. And usually they kind of like seeing things in 3D. Okay, Diet Coke. This is kind of a project that came out in New York, but again, it had a sculptural 3D element. The client got a whole bunch of artists to do a limited edition series for Diet Coke, and we actually got to produce them into physical sculptures, which was super fun. So they had that in a public space. And that's what the original artwork looked like. It got given to an ice sculptor to kind of create into the actual sculpture. Then I also did one which was like a laser cut version. So I ended up kind of like cutting layers and sandwiching them together. Again, just obviously based on the experience of doing the laser stuff for the skateboard, the idea came to mind to kind of do something like this. Then got a photographer to shoot it. And then that was the final piece, retouched for the poster. This was for McDonald's. They wanted to use the special sauce to do an ad and make all the type out of the special sauce. They ended up doing a lot of 3D, the guys at Res who got us on board to do the job. So I ended up kind of crafting all these kind of headlines. This was the beginning of last year. And yeah. But the thing is, like, the sauce is quite spewy and chunky. So they kind of had to blend it for the ad because otherwise it didn't really work.
Introducing the Clubhouse Burger with crispy chicken, bacon, caramelized onion, cheddar cheese on a brioche-style bun, and the star of the Clubhouse, the Big Mac Special Sauce.
Okay. This is Hip Hop Honors. This is a return client. I did some work for the MTV VMAs, and I built a good relationship with the producer there in New York. And he was also taking care of the Hip Hop Awards, the VH1 Hip Hop Honors Awards. So it kind of got us back on 16 and 17 when they're putting on the awards to kind of like develop the identity. And they kind of went for something simple, but they still wanted us to do the 3D trophy that was given out to all the artists. So I was super stoked for that. And these were some of the variations I explored for the brand identity. And then again, just bringing it into 3D for the actual trophy, for the award. And just kind of playing around with the letters. I really liked the repetitive nature of hip hop. You know, it's kind of like got a perpetual thing about it, and the last, like the end result of the award, plays into that. So this is some of the stuff. This was done. That's like a CAD render. That's why it's so kind of like looks like that. So this is kind of the final award, and what we did, where it ended up getting rapid prototyped and then dipped in chrome. Although you can actually rapid prototype in metal now, so. Yeah, so again, I mean, just working with 3 dimensions and kind of like using the whole concept of like, if you find the meaning behind what it is, then you can kind of like, you kind of like incorporate that back into the design. That's the final awards. That's the 3D printed version, and obviously that's the chrome version. Cool, so that was a great honor. And then, like what I was talking about before, creating this unique style with the 3D rendering, I kind of created a whole style and then developed art pieces based on this style. And then GQ in the UK approached us to do some editorial, and then also use this image to for Samuel L. Jackson to present an award to J.J. Abrams for Man of the Year awards. So this ended up getting used on stage at the awards, and I was super stoked with that. Again, that was done in cinema, obviously reflections. And then this is kind of like transpired into other clients wanting to kind of like create similar work. And then, recently I collaborated with the guys at the ex-Mambo guy, the name will come to me, Eddie Zammit from T-World, and the ex-Mambo guy, Angus Kingsmill, who's an amazing dude, and they do some really great art shows, one which is on tonight actually. And I did a t-shirt graphics for a Star Wars exhibition, and this actually uses augmented reality. So when you put your phone over the t-shirt comes alive. And I also did an lenticular art piece for the show as well. So you use the iJack app, and the t-shirt animates. And that's the lenticular version. So the great thing about lenticular, you can actually squeeze 24 frames in there. So you could have an animated piece and do a lenticular thing and have 20, you know. So that excited me about that medium. So yeah, the brand is Radio Velvet. That's Angus Kingsmill's brand. Oh, we don't need that. Then it did some stuff for Marvel, for Angus as well. And then this was some stuff for the guys at Elastic, which was a huge honor as well in LA. This was for last year's VMAs. So they kind of approached us. There's a creative director there, Duncan Elms. He's an old friend from Sydney. Patrick Lair was there, and they got a whole bunch of creatives, including Raoul Marx, who's amazing. He worked on the final piece. So this was some concept development work for the VMAs. They went for a really kind of chromey route, but this was a concept I developed between like two parallel worlds. So the MTV man goes from a light world into a dark world and then into the audience for the event. They didn't go with this route, but I was really happy with this. Was using Octane in cinema. And again, like when I was in high school in the 90s, I used to look at Heavy Metal magazine, which was a fantasy art magazine, and they'd have guys like Corbin and Mobius and Jean Girard who do like really kind of futuristic, trippy stuff. So I guess that's kind of had an influence on my creativity as well. Okay. Oop. This was for Shell House in Sydney, which is just a large holding for an old Art Deco building. They love the Star Wars stuff, so they kind of got us to do all the 3D on this. I mean, sorry, they love the Gatsby stuff. And yeah, this was a fairly quick turnaround, like 2 months. And then all they did is just give me a list of names. And I used the names, and then I kind of created my own logos. There were no logos existing. They just kind of said these guys were on site between this era and this era, like this date and this date, and then you just come up with the logos and create the pattern. This was again for Elastic. This was contributing work. I was one of the team of the designers that did stuff for Dirty Money. Actually, it's an amazing documentary you guys should watch. It's got a lot of dirt on Trump, and it's got like a whole bunch of really interesting stuff, like just stuff that's gone on around the world. So this was some of the frames, and this is the title sequence. And that was a very large, talented team that worked on that, so I'm stoked to have contributed to that.
Okay. Sorry, we've run out of time, and we wanted to get all of Luca's content in.
If you guys want to check out more stuff, it's all on all my social anyway, so yeah.
Big thanks to Luca.